Most of us are completely removed from the process of making food. When you get hungry, you don't hunt or forage. You open a fridge or tap on a screen. We usually view this as progress. The standard historical narrative describes the move from nomadic hunting to settled farming as an upgrade, the moment human life became safer, more stable, and more comfortable. However, the archaeological record suggests something else. Many modern anthropologists now argue that the transition to agriculture was a catastrophic error. For 96% of our history, humans lived as nomadic hunter-gatherers. We have only been farmers for that tiny sliver at the very end, the final 4% of our time on Earth. Data from these earlier societies shows that people typically worked just 15 to 20 hours a week to secure food. Because they were nomadic, they couldn't hoard wealth, resulting in communities with no distinct gap between rich and poor. If early human life was balanced and provided ample leisure time, we have to ask why our ancestors would trade it for a life of back-breaking labor in the dirt. They didn't do it because they wanted to. About 12,000 years ago, a climate event called the Younger Dryas triggered a sudden global freeze, devastating the ecosystems our ancestors relied on. Traditional forests shrunk, the massive animals went extinct, and starvation became a global reality. Facing extinction, humans likely observed that wild grains dropped near their camps sprouted in the mud after seasonal rains. This behavior took hold in the river valleys of the Fertile Crescent. These areas provided the only reliable water sources as the surrounding landscape succumbed to drought. Humans began selecting the largest, strongest seeds to replant. Over generations, this unconscious selection process transformed wild grasses into the high-yield crops we recognize today. This transition was a response to a dying planet. When traditional food sources vanished, extracting calories from the dirt became a necessary adaptation for survival. Cultivating these crops created a food surplus. For the first time, one person's labor produced enough calories to feed multiple people. But protecting this harvest required humans to stop moving. They had to physically anchor themselves to their fields to guard the grain. Archaeological sites from this era contain heavy grinding tools and large clay storage jars. These were essential for processing and protecting grain, but they were impossible to carry on a nomadic hunt. Settling down removed the natural spacing between pregnancies found in nomadic tribes. In permanent villages, the population began to explode at a rate humanity had never seen before. Within a few centuries, these populations became so large that the wild forests could no longer support them. Humanity had crossed a point of no return. They were now entirely dependent on the fields they had created. This dependency came with a physical cost. Ancient skeletons show that early farmers were shorter, suffered from massive tooth decay due to their grain-heavy diets, and developed chronic arthritis from farm labor. Living in permanent settlements alongside domesticated animals also created a biological bridge for disease. This environment allowed viruses to jump from livestock to humans, giving birth to smallpox and influenza. The toll was social as well. Because grain could be stored and hoarded, the human concept of private property began to take shape. Those who controlled the grain held the power. This ended the era of equal sharing and established the first social hierarchies, dividing people into rulers, priests, and laborers. Stockpiled food also became a target. Villages began violently raiding one another for their silos, leading to the invention of organized warfare and the construction of defensive walls. By deciding to plant a seed, humanity set in motion the forces that created institutional poverty, chronic disease, and war. This is the central paradox of our history. On an individual level, life became sicker, harder, and more restricted for those first generations of farmers. However, the surplus grain changed the human trajectory. It meant that a segment of the population could step away from food production to focus on specialized skills like blacksmithing, writing, and astronomy. Our modern world, from the technology in your hand to the cities we live in, is the long-term result of those first harvests. While agriculture made individual lives harder, it enabled the population growth and specialization that made our current reality possible. We live in the house that farming built.